Welcome back to the Dashboard Effect Podcast. I'm Brick Thompson.
I'm Caleb Oakes.
Caleb, in our last episode, we talked about data models behind Power BI reports and how they can affect how a report performs, among other things. I'd like to just dig into what is good performance for a report. What should a developer expect of themselves in the report they produce? What should users expect?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Our benchmark, which I think is a really good one, is 3 to 5 seconds for a page or visual to load.
Okay.
Right. So when you get to a report, you first open up. There might be multiple visuals on the page, but those all should return in 3 to 5 seconds. Right. So 5 seconds really should be your max. But obviously the faster the better.
Right.
But it's probably going to takes a little bit of time, obviously, for the engine to
and
render
you're talking
any
for
visual.
Full load. Like, it doesn't count if some visualizations have popped up and you're still waiting.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm talking about the full load. Like if you've got every visual except for one and one takes 30 seconds, like that's bad.
Yeah. Right.
You don't want that.
Right.
Yeah. And the reason for that is not only just like for user experience, for it to be faster, but what's really interesting is that people tend to trust the numbers if it comes back fast.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. It makes sense intuitively.
Right. If it takes a while, this doubt starts to creep in around like what's going on here.
Is this accurate? That's interesting.
Which really, in reality, it really has nothing to do with each other, but it's an interesting perception.
Just feels that way. Huh, didn't know that. That's a good one. Are there edge cases where it's okay for a report to take longer to load?
Yeah, I mean, there can be. A lot of really, I mean, I would like to say no. Like, you should always be fast.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to provide data in a way that it just is inherently slow to do it. Right.
Okay.
So one example might be you have to provide a big wide table of measures and columns because it's going to be exported and sent to somebody or something, right?
Okay. So a table or a matrix visualization could slow you down.
Yeah, if it has a lot of stuff in it, right? Yeah. So it just the more metrics that you have on a page, the slower it's going to be. And, tables are the most susceptible to having a lot of measures in it.
Yeah. And then does that time limit, that standard, do you apply that to things like cross-filtering too? Mm-hmm. I mean, those usually perform pretty well, but...
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Right. You should be able to click around, and it should be pretty snappy. It should feel really seamless and quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you do if let's say you've produced a report and it's just running slowly? I'm assuming based on our last episode, you start to suspect your data model, but how do you go at that? How do you fix it?
Yeah. So the way that I've always debugged performance issues is I always narrow it to the visual that's causing the problem. Well, first of all, you definitely need to look at your model. Like if you've got a complex model, you've got a lot of relationships, and you're, back to the last episode, you're having to make a lot of steps between tables to pull values all together, that's a problem. So as long as you've got a clean data model, then you can start into like the actual visual performance. Measure performance optimization. And the way to do that is to narrow it down to what visual is giving you the problem, then really just isolate that and start just eliminating things until you find the metric that's giving you the problem. And then you can start digging into, okay, this metric is the problem. Is it DAX? Am I performing something that could be improved in the model? Like, could I add a column in the model that will make this calculation easier, for example?
Yeah.
But that's kind of how you go about it. You just kind of step through to the lowest denominator.
You just watch it load, and if a particular visual is taking a long time to load, you suspect that one.
Yeah. Really, okay. Really from the development process in general, you should be doing like testing of your visuals. Like a common mistake is that someone might load a subset of the data, build everything, and then load everything.
And find
out that everything you've written performs really terribly.
Yeah.
The other thing that is common is that you may load all the data, but then you're doing all of your development with a filter set the whole time. So just last month,
not having to work that hard. Yeah.
And then you deploy it to your users, and they open the thing wide open, and then it doesn't even load or something, right? So you definitely want to develop against everything and make sure your measures are fast.
Interesting.
From the ground up.
So you're developing against everything. You wouldn't take the shortcut of like, all right, let me filter this down just to make it work faster while I'm developing. Develop against everything. If it's not working fast enough for your development, there's a problem somewhere.
Exactly. Right.
Oh, I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there a particular, are there certain things to look out for in DAX? Like, are summarized statements typically bad, or are there things?
Yeah, there are. You really have to know DAX pretty well to be able to find all of them. But yeah, summarize can get you. Anything that really goes row by row, I think one of the biggest ones to look out for is an if statement. So if you have like, if this column is blank, or if this measure is blank, then do this other thing. Basically what it will have to do is it has to just run that if statement. So it has to calculate the whatever metric you're running the if over, and then if it's true each time it does that calculation, then it has to do another one.
Okay.
And it's like the if conditions can just kill you. It really can turn into like 3 measures in one.
Is there a trick to overcoming that?
Yeah, I mean, you should just not have ifs.
Oh, really? Just don't use them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of.
So put a flag in a column or something like that.
Yeah, and most of the time when you need an if, it's to do something for like the UI, like to say if this is blank, then return a 0 or something,
show
right?
an
Or
A
like,
or whatever.
it's
Yeah.
probably a bad example, but yeah, like something to make the report look maybe a little bit better.
Yeah.
In those cases, you just got to like push back. I mean, I just had a request this week about wanting to add a 0 instead of a blank in a table, and I had to tell them, like, this is going to sound weird, but doing that is actually really difficult, and it can slow the report way down. Because as soon as you could like do a +0, but then you get every single value, whether or not there should be a value there or not.
Yeah.
And it just be show up with a 0. So it's not super intuitive that way, but you just have to really push back and be like, that's going to kill us, so we're not going to do that.
That makes sense. Does a statement like a SUMX, is that also one that's having to iterate through?
Mm-hmm.
So those are going to hurt you. They're super valuable. I don't know how you do some of those calculations without it.
Yeah. SUMX is great. However, nesting is when you get into trouble, right? So let's say you've got one measure that is doing a SUMX, and then you have another one
inside
that
of it.
is like another SUMX that's using that measure.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So as soon as they start
having to do that
referencing
every
each other,
time.
and that can be really slow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of pitfalls in there. I think the big takeaway for me, if I were developing, is the advice you have about be testing as you're developing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't use a limited data set if you can help it. Don't filter the data down so that you're getting a false sense that things are performing well, and they might not once you get into production.
Right. Yeah, and then from an end user perspective, if your reports are slow, past that 3 to 5 second threshold, you might really want to look at one, like, what's the composition of the report? Is it just a big table of data? Do you really need that, or would it be smarter to kind of break it up, make it a little bit more actionable? A big table of data is not very awesome to look at and actually understand things.
So a simple solution to that is, if you need that big table of data in some cases, let's say you need to do the export to Excel, I think was your example we were talking about, just have that on a separate page.
Right.
And when you need it, go to it, but don't have it part of the main report.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then second is really, you should have high standards for how fast your Power BI reports perform, because that's what it's meant to do, right?
Yeah.
That's why it's so interactive, and it's built that way. So if you're having big problems, you probably need to either look at data model, or you need some DAX help.
Don't just accept it.
Yeah.
Don't just say,
accept
well,
it,
this one just takes 20 seconds. That's okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Got it. All right.
Cool.
Good discussion. Thanks.
Yep.